Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome in. Today we are talking about synthesizers. We've been learning about synthesizers for I don't know, a couple of years around here. And today we're going to do a little demo, put some hands on the ARP 2600 and talk about oscillators, because it's really kind of a totally fascinating story. Like how these things came to be at all and then came to be musical, right? So here we are. This is the 1971 Tonus ARP 2600. The difference between just an ARP 2600 and a Tonus ARP is Tonus was the first company name before they changed it to ARP. So the Tonus units are super rare compared to the other ones, I guess. This particular model is the exact same one that Anthony Marinelli has that was used in a Thriller bass thing. And this patch right here is totally that Thriller patch to an extent. I start in that basic area with a lot of bass sounding patches, and I've just done this bass patch for a song that I was working on. You gotta love a good old clicky 1971 keyboard. But I'll tell you, the action on this keyboard is so good. I mean, the action on the Mini Moog, so good. These key beds are phenomenal. There's so many cool things that are that come with an old instrument. Nobody ever talks about that, it seems like to me, but totally relevant because you're playing the keys the whole time. So anyways, let's talk about the synthesizer. So really all it is, it's a couple of oscillators. It's three instruments in one thing. So we have an oscillator here, and this is a good synthesizer to learn from, because as you can see, there's tons of labels, and there's all these arrows, and everything kind of makes sense. So ignore the whole bottom half, because these are just speakers, and yeah, they work. It's super cool. You can just suitcase this thing around, plug it into a wall, and you've got an ARP 2600 right there. It's so cool. So ignore the bottom part though. This is just kind of extra things to manipulate all this electricity over and above and beyond. This stuff takes us into R2D2 land, which is that's how those sounds were made, was on an ARP 2600, just like this one. So, but up at the top, we got three instruments. Basically, each oscillator is an instrument that you could, hook a keyboard to, basically, and play it. And so after that, there's a little mixer, just like anything else. If you had a guitar and a bass and drums and you wanted to put them together, you'd put them through a mixer. Well, yeah, got a mixer right here, easy peasy. The thing above that is the filter, and the filter affects everything. All a filter is an EQ, basically, that closes the whole EQ down when you cut everything out, and then when you put it all back, you're kind of opening the whole EQ back up. And filters are what makes most synths kind of special. Every synth has its own filter flavor, etc. The Mini Moog, the 2600. Even I have an Odyssey over there. The Odyssey has, again, a different filter, and they all have a different sound and vibe to them, which is totally cool. I mean, these things are amazing. When you think about how cool they are from musicians, and then realize that they started not from musicians, but from scientists. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So we got this awesome little machine here that's called a synth, and inside it are these oscillators that we're talking about. And so what is an oscillator, and where did this thing come from? So amazingly enough, it's the universe was not going to allow synthesizers to be ignored, to not be made. The universe insisted that these things were going to come into the world and be musical instruments in the end. And the universe was obviously successful. And so I say it was insistent, because both in the United States and America and then in Germany at the same time, within a year of each other, And so in those times, communication wasn't nearly, it wasn't fast like it is now. It took a while. So it's no surprise that, it took a year before like everybody figured out that like, oh, these two guys in these two different countries invented the same thing. And what they invented was the basic oscillator. You're like, what's an oscillator? Well, it's just a thing that goes back and forth, right? My hand does this, my hand is now oscillating, right? Think about, you've heard this word around the household with an oscillating fan. Why is it called an oscillating fan? Because it goes wee, 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 back and forth. It oscillates. And so each one of these guys, they were doing science stuff with like radio transmission because that's what was hot at the time. We're going to try to make like voices go across the air somewhere or over a wire somewhere. And but in this case, over the air, telecommunications, like radio is what, was happening at the time. So they're trying to make radio better and stuff. And so they each have a circuit, and basically they kind of made feedback happen on the circuit, and I'm not a scientist or a scholar, right? Keep that in mind. I'm just a dude, y'all, chill. And so, they introduce feedback into their circuits. And what happens, like any guitar player knows, if you walk up to a speaker with your, like your amp, with your guitar, with everything up and like say a lot of gain, good distortion pedals and stuff, like it's going to feed back. And once that feedback gets going, it's like a loop. It won't stop. It's just going to keep on going indefinitely. And so that's what happened in these guys' little circuits, which is super cool. Like they noticed like, it's making a sound, it's like going, and it's all of a sudden it's looping on itself. It has ramped itself up to a point, like just like feedback. We're just there it stays. It's just like humming at that thing. And so this was important to these guys because they wanted to send like sound waves through the air, from here to there and be accurate about it and stuff. And so the only way they knew how to do it at the time was with like things that were sending like much lower frequencies. So what do we know about like low frequencies versus high frequencies? You might have just heard my tiny dog bark in high frequencies, totally different from the big dog, right? They're like jumping in right on time with perfect examples. The big dog, like the bass. What do we know about bass? Like, subwoofers are like 12 inches versus like some other speakers. Most can be like 4 or 6 inches, but subwoofers 12, man, maybe 18. Why? Because bass waves are enormous. So if you've ever listened to like music in a big open space with a good system, big subwoofers, like a concert or something, and the bass is just enormous. You're like, wow, man, it's just shaking my rib cage. It's because the room is so big. There's room for those bass, the waves to actually be in the space that you're in, and you can really feel them. And so, problem with that is those kind of waves are kind of hard to move like long distances accurately through the air versus a tiny high pitch wave that's like much tighter, and it's just like, and it's just, they can laser focus these things. So that's what they figured. They're like, cool, we got this oscillator, can shoot the thing through the air. And so they basically, like, long story short, you talk into a microphone, like for radio, for telephone, you talk into it, it converts your voice into amplitude and pitch, like electric signals. And those signals are then plopped onto that wave that they generated with the oscillator. Right? Are you following? It's super cool. And so that wave they make with the oscillator is called a carrier wave. It carries whatever you want to put on it because it flies good. That's the only reason. The thing flies good, right? And so they're like, yeah, we got a little bit of data for this voice, the amplitude, pitch, plop it on there, carry it over there, decode it, boom. Now you've got radio in high fidelity. You've got phones that don't sound ridiculous. And so that's what oscillators did. So naturally, this is super important to people in like World War II, I think, is where just gangbusters with the oscillators. They were used for everything, to calibrate all kinds of radar technology and for radio communications, of course, and all this. So like oscillators are everywhere. But then the war ended, and so like there's just all of a sudden oscillators everywhere. Everyone's got an oscillator. You want an oscillator? You just toss them in a trash can. So a couple of these guys, right? Bob Moog, Alan R. Perlman, a couple of these guys, they are starting to play with these things, right? And these two figure out, again, at basically the same time. And they figure out that, well, this thing, the oscillator, it makes a tone, beep, you know, makes this carrier wave signal, beep. And like, what if we make that into like, could we control it and like give it pitches, you know, like an instrument? And it turns out they could. So they both invented the voltage controlled oscillator at the very same time. Like, crazy. So like I said, the universe was not going to let us get out of here without having one of these things right here. Right? So the voltage controlled oscillator simply means now these oscillators here, we can tell it like, oh, use like this voltage, we'll give it this much, and then we'll give it a little more or a little more. And as we give it more, it like, you know, goes up in frequency, which increases the pitch. So they figure out a nice scale for this, and now we just do it right like that. We are changing the pitch, and that's the carrier signal, you know, just tone that we started with. So it's like totally cool. That's where synthesizers come from. The whole thing is science. It wasn't music really. It became music. And so the genius of it all and the science, they made those, and those are awesome, and we love them. That's great. And these guys, you know, ARP and Moog, they came and put their filter things in there and made it even more musical and fun. And then we also, they you know, it's like they're like, hey, we can hear sound, you know, like it has some characteristics to it. So if you hear a sound, it either starts, you know, like quick or like slow, you know, so it's like that's quick or slow. And a sound may release quickly or slowly, you know. And then there's two more things that can go along with that. We have sustain and decay. And so the sustain is like how long it's going to hold. Like if I press and hold the key like this, it's going to hold on to that for a certain amount of time, right? So that can be short, it can be almost infinite. And so we can set that. And cool thing, most of the time you're going to use this control combined with the next one, decay, to kind of match the tempo of a song. So when you're playing like a bass line, for example, hear how it goes, boom, you know, there's a timing to it. So you can match your tempo to that. And it really makes a bass instrument fit into a song like so well. So with that sustain, how long it's going to hold, you know, and then there's like decay between how fast it starts and how long it's going to hold and stuff. We have how fast does it get from the start to the hold, right? So you can hear there it's quick. Now I'll make it slow. Bam. Now it's in sustain. Now it's in sustain, or boom, boom, just really quick. And so we get to control how the sound comes at us, and it's like that right there is an instrument. So like, why are these instruments so beloved and so, you know, sought after? Why is this so much better than other hardware ones? I wouldn't say it's so much better, being like the Korg or the Behringer. Those are amazing, and you should totally get one. If you're thinking about getting one, you're on the fence, get off the fence and just go get one, because it'll change your life. Having the thing in front of you where you can physically mess with it, because I've had all the software, and I tried to learn Synths before I had these. I tried to learn, you know, on the software versions of these, which are identical, and it's just like it doesn't happen. You know, I just end up like, 20 minutes later, I'm hitting a preset, you know. Whereas once these things are in front of you in your space, it didn't take one day before I knew that, like, oh, that's the Make Stuff Cool slider. Oh, let's put two oscillators together. Oh, now we're getting, or what if we put three together? And so you quickly learn the things. But so a bass sound like this, which is just like the Thriller bass, you start with a tone. So our tone here is a sawtooth wave, and it's coming right out of this oscillator, number 3, right to the oscillator 3 channel on the mixer. Not much sustain, not a lot of decay. It's just a pretty quick note. funky keyboard. We love it, sounds good. Now we're like, okay, let's add another oscillator to it. So what happens then? Now this one is a pulse wave. Cool, totally different sound, right? It's round versus. So good to get, good mixed together. And on a third oscillator, we can do, so like you can see each one of these oscillators kind of has some wave outputs because it can generate all of these waves if they set it up to. So like the first one outputs a sawtooth and a square. The second one will do a triangle, a sawtooth, a sine, and a pulse, which is like a square that you can adjust like the timbre of it. And then the last one, a third oscillator, will do sawtooth and pulse. And so with pulse is the only one, like I said, you can adjust the timbre. It has this pulse width control. And you're basically, when you do that, you're taking a sound and you're changing the period. Like, so a waveform looks like that, you know, of course. But this, the pulse wave, which is like a square, it's a square. It goes up like a square. And so in between each square, ups and downs, you can change that spacing. And as you do, it changes the timbre. So we go from until we fart it out, really. So you know, that's cool. You can dial in a tone that you just like perfectly. But what's kind of even cooler, and this is the Anthony Marinelli trick, or at least that's where I learned it from him, is you can combine these notes, right? So these two oscillators, we got one sound coming from 3, one sound coming from 2. And what we can do is combine the two of them. So by introducing the control, basically the pulse width control, we're going to modulate that by the shape of the envelope over here, right? So like, which seems kind of confusing, but it's not that confusing really. So like that's your shape, and what you're going to do is basically take this pulse width slider, and every time you hit a note, that pulse width slider is going to go up and down, same shape as that control. It's just going to, you know, like that kind of a thing. So that's what you're doing when you introduce that. So we're going to take the output and just patch it right into this control slider. So as you see, as I pull this up, I can fart it out. Just as if we were using this control. But so what it's actually doing, it's like going from that modulation and down into, but on the shape of that curve, into the non-pulse width, like brassy-ish, you know, harsh sound, just like harsh and mellow out. So we can put that with the other tone. You know, like how cool is that? Without it, with it. It's just like a little color, a little flavor, like right on the front end, just to get it like just kind of cool. Like, so things like that, that's the coolness of synthesizers, you know, the adjustments that we can make to the way the sound comes at us, you know, and also just which waveforms we can use and put them together. And let me tell you, when you get these sounds out into the world, nothing sounds so huge. Because like I said, I have all of these software instruments too, and I used them for years. And now when I hear like an old track that has a software, one of these on it, I can tell instantly that it's not the real thing. And I kind of thought that was silly before I had them myself, but it's true. It's absolutely true. When you put them in, I put these in everything I ever do, for me, for every client, for every project. They go in almost everything because they really do sound like that good. There's something to that, to the fact that these sounds are being created like in the world with electricity, just feeding components that like feed back on themselves and ramp up into a thing, and then we manipulate it, and that's sound, and it becomes music, versus like a digital 1s and 0 version of that, which is for all intents and purposes identical, but the end result, as I've learned, not quite so much. So there's a pretty extended look at kind of the history of oscillators and how these things turned into music making machines. Cheers.